Everyone, welcome back to week 21 of building Hogwarts in Lego. Last week, and the week before. So for the last two episodes, we've been working on the tower building over here, and it's finally complete. Looks great, super sturdy, somewhat. That has yet to be touched, and this is yet to be touched. And that's what we're going to be doing this week, or at least starting with, and we'll see how far we can get. Now, one of the main things that I decided that I want to do with this area is in regards to the opening panel, the opening door right here to the Great Hall. Now, some of you might notice that I decided to take out the two fire brackets that are right here. Just these little things, nothing major, but initially I had them lined all the way around, just as I do on the other side over here. And they were in the way of opening this panel, so they were kind of redundant. I've decided that for this area, I want to make sure whatever I build does not go above this level so that I have the ability to fully open up this panel and still be able to look right into the Great Hall from this, which is pretty much the only view unless you take the Great Hall off of the mock entirely. So what we're doing is really limited to basically about two, basically cusping on 3 bricks. So that's not much, but it is terrain, so we're not having to get too extravagant over here. So I've decided to take a little bit of my own route when it comes to designing this area. I am using Hogwarts Legacy still as an inspiration, but because the shaping of this area is just now completely different from what is in Hogwarts Legacy, and the scale is completely off, and the fact that I've decided that I'm not going to put a skylight, if you will, as I had said in previous episodes, I'm just going to kind of make it up as I go along. Now, obviously, the concept is going to stay the same because this is still going to be some form of a garden, and that should be fairly simple to achieve. But we're gonna just let the we're gonna let the area dictate how the shaping comes out. So the first thing, of course, is we've got these 2 doorways that lead between the Great Hall and the Grand Staircase Tower, and then of course there would be something that leads in that general direction. I'm going to make a path that comes from here to here. That's step 1. And I've already just started experimenting with throwing a bunch of wedge plates together, as you can see right here. And this will just meet up with the angle of the Great Hall, step down to the dark tan base, and all around it will be green, and it will kind of build up to the path. And over here, I'm thinking of making a really nice sort of cliff edge so that people could potentially walk right up to and have a view if there was more of the muck this way. The yellow bricks, in case you're wondering, is just an indicator for me so that I know where the door comes out to, and anything beyond this point I can have taller. Not that there probably will be, perhaps a bench or something, but it's just a little guidance for me. So I'm going to start by building off this path and start stemming away from it and see what I come up with. So here we are, having done a little bit of progress. I've basically just been taking my time with making the path and the terrain around it, and I've been filling it in with filler brick, with bricks, with plates, anything to just make this as structurally sound as possible. I did have to move the Great Hall a little bit just so that I could get in here a little bit better. You could see all the multicolored bricks right here. So I wanted to be structural all the way to the very end. There wouldn't be any like weird bits where you push down and all of a sudden it caves in. In terms of how I'm going about, kind of doing the grass and such, I thought I'd let the path frame how the rest of the garden around it is sort of formed. So because the path steadily goes up here, this bit of the garden will be a lot higher and it will kind of steeply end on this cliffside, whereas it will then gradually slope down to here just the same way as the path does. I've been trying to just, take my time and just work on the detail as I'm actually building it, as opposed to doing like a finished slate and then adding detail on top of it. I'm trying to do it all in one so I can get an idea if, as I'm building it, is this what I'm liking. Of course, it's not a particularly big area either, so it will be done quite quickly. We've just got to do a little bit more of the path over here, put some more steps down, put some, greenery over here, some greenery over here, and that's basically the garden. Obviously, we'll try to put a few things to make it a little bit more interesting, some benches perhaps, and just some general scenes with minifigs. And then the last little bit that we have to worry about is how we can transition from grass to, the inside of the courtyard over here. I've decided, of course, that I'm not going to put a wall here because that would block the opening. So we'll just have to figure out an interesting way to transition it in this section over here. And then once we finish with the garden, of course, we've got this building here, which in previous weeks I have expressed my, I guess, dislike for it. And I think it might be time for another rebuild of a castle building. I've also had to take this panel off of the roof. It's just sitting right there because every time I would work here, I kept brushing my arm against it and knocking it over. And because that's the only piece that has some serious weight to it because of these towers over here, it just kept falling to the floor and crashing. And at one point, I lost the hinges for about 20 minutes and I was getting very frustrated. So I've taken that off for the moment so I can work in peace over here. And I might move the Great Hall entirely so I can get around to some more obscure areas. And of course, part of also doing the garden that I forgot to mention is that I need to make sure that I make this corridor right here nice and secure. And that can only be done by putting pieces right up against it in the same fashion that we've been doing with this, so it lines up exactly with the sides of the building. And hopefully we can cover up that band of dark tan at the bottom so that it blends in a little bit more. And after a little while, here we have the finished garden. I decided to go with a little bit more of a sort of rough and ready approach to gardening as opposed to making it look all curated. I think it just lends itself to giving a little bit more of a gritty feel and just a little bit of an extra dimension to Hogwarts. If I just had kind of flat, curated green spaces like I have right there, then things look really dull really quickly. So if we're comparing that courtyard back there to this, I definitely think this is the approach I want to do because this actually adds something to the buildings that are surrounding it. But just as a little walkthrough of what exactly we've got going on here, we've got, of course, the main path. I decided to sprinkle a few of these 1x1 round tiles just to tie in this stone staircase that steps down. And it kind of links it a little bit together. We've got quite a lot of just plates, tiles, and slopes mixed all together in here with, some rock work going on in the corner just to add it a little bit of dimension. I'm pretty happy with how it turns out. I'm not even sure that I want to add plant pieces, things like that, things like the regular stems, any flowers. I'm quite happy with how this looks. And frankly speaking, this is Scotland. And, besides heather growing on some hills, it's not like there's bouquets of everything everywhere. And sorry, I think a bouquet is actually just like what you hold in your hand, give on dates and stuff, but we'll gloss over that. You know what I mean? It is Scotland. It's a very rough and sort of just like really cool, gritty place. It's not nice and flowery. So we're keeping this. In terms of transition between here and there, I decided, why overcomplicate it? Just mix it together somehow. And I think it looks completely fine. So the next thing that I want to focus on in this video is the rest of these buildings, which I talked about a little bit earlier in the video, namely this one over here. And I'll come around the front to explain it in a little bit more detail, but just very simply said, I think it's too short. It's not wide enough for what I want this building to be, and it just doesn't look entirely accurate to the movies, the books, Hogwarts Legacy, anything. So if I can afford it, I want to try to extend this space in the middle by maybe like 2 to 4 studs. The way I would do that, of course, is by bringing the tower this way. Now, obviously, there's the complication in that the interior is completely finished and the rock work is as such. So what I would have to do is potentially just do a bunch of inverted slopes and kind of extend this bit right here so I can pull that tower all the way to the edge right here. I will just have to be careful about the amount of space between these two towers because I don't want them basically sitting on top of each other. And there is that little bridge that is basically just a miniature version of that stems between these two towers as well. So I have to be conscious about how that works. I'll go around to the front and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. All right, so I'm going to try my best to get the gist across with just this one concept drawing. This is the Hogwarts Legacy. Art and making of Hogwarts Legacy. Honestly, you guys should get this book if you're ever building a Hogwarts. I'm getting distracted. So obviously here we have the grand staircase tower. Here we have the other tower. And then this is the building in question right here. If you look at that, you can see that the doorway, the big archway, is very much on the left-hand side. And while it is a pretty tall building, it's got some width to it. You can tell it's a pretty hefty building. And then you look at mine, and you can kind of see the difference. It has probably the same height, but it honestly needs to be about 1/3 wider in order to just give some breathing room to the doorway. It's so close to the grand staircase tower, and it just looks like a really skinny filler building rather than being its own structure. Height-wise, I think it is perfectly fine. I might lower it by a brick or two just in order to get the proportions a little bit right, but I definitely feel the need, now more than ever while I'm working on this and trying to perfect it, is to move this tower over 4 bricks, even 6 if I could possibly do it, but that's probably pushing it a little bit too much, just so that we can pretty much rebuild this entire building from scratch to the right proportions of the game, so that it can start looking a little bit more like this. Oh, and I'm sure you guys have seen this in the foreground. I think I mentioned in last week's video or the week before that I got this as a Christmas gift, and I've just built it, placed it here in Hogwarts. It is probably one of the most beautiful sets LEGO has released in recent years. That's just my personal opinion. I love it. I've got the original 2005 one, and it just does not come close to how cool this is. Now, I do want to include it in the Hogwarts mock, but you can see the area I have dedicated for water and just how much space this takes up, even for being as small as it is. So I'd love to have it, but we'll see if I actually can put it, because it is pretty much blocking the entire main shot of Hogwarts. You know, it looks a little bit nicer like this. I could try to put it over there, but there really isn't that space with the boathouse where it's at currently. All right, so just one thing to point out before we get any further is this panel right here would kind of be the center line of the Grand Staircase Tower. And you can see how the 2 buildings on the right over here are actually pushed about 3 or 4 studs back from that center line. And all that was done initially several weeks ago in order so that these 2 buildings right here aren't overcrowding each other and basically sitting on top of themselves. And that gives me a noticeable gap in between that just looks a little bit more realistic. And I'm able to create this gorge and at some point put a little bridge between it. So by making this bit wider, I just have to be a little bit careful about how close I get to these 2 buildings. And I might have to think about pushing it even further back if I feel that these are starting to sit on top of each other. So there is a little bit of a delicate balance to do. The wider I make this building, the closer this gets to over here. The only way to compensate is to push it further back. So we're going to do a little bit of fiddling and we'll see how we get along. All right, so first steps, clean slate, and I've just noticed that there's a bit of a problem with the plate here. There is absolutely no structure underneath there, so I'm going to have to rip this up. And I don't actually remember what this bit of the structure looks like, so I'll show you a tour of what that looks like as well. And we'll fix it up, then we'll get started up here. So actually the reason why there's no structure is because this is part of the hallway behind Snape's classroom. You can even see that the tiling was never finished, just because you'll never be able to actually see it from this angle. So I'm just going to have to reinforce the plates just right here in the corner. Just stretch some more plates around here, and hopefully that will be secure enough to hold up that corner of the plate over there. All right, so we've got Hogwarts Legacy open because I was struggling a little bit to get an idea of what this building actually looks like. And just taking a quick look here, one of the key things that makes it distinct from all the other buildings is it's actually got these indented little archways. So normally, you know, you'd have windows, but it's just nothing. It's just the brick's been sunken back. And so I am definitely going to try that because it just adds a little bit of character to the building. You can see essentially the proportions between how much space there is on each side. And if I were to show you my building right here, it's not far off. It's just way too skinny. So I do have the you know, what is this, 2 to 5, and that looks more like it's, you know, 4 to 10. So it does work, but then in comparison to the size of the archway, obviously it doesn't. So I'm going to try to build it as big as I possibly can. And then if it's too big, I'll start working my way down so that I have enough space on this side for the 2 towers to sit next to each other. You can see currently I've got, 4 on this side, and I've got 10 on this side, as I was just saying. And if I were to just one moment, go ahead and put the tower right there, you can see how they sit pretty much on top of each other. And we have hardly any gap there. That is not something I like at all. I could try moving it slightly back so that it's maybe, you know, sitting somewhat like this, and it's just popping out. Sorry. So it's just popping out like that. That's a little bit better in terms of the spacing, but I'm not entirely happy with that. I really like it just to be centered. That would make things look a lot better. So the proportions, we're going to work it out, but at least you guys can see roughly now what it is going to look like. And you can also see here just how the this line of the ramparts on the tower lines up pretty much perfectly with the roof line of that main building. So comparison to this building, we're basically saying that this line right here should line up with the top of the tower, which is what we had before. If I put it side by side, I mean, I did have those things right. It really just comes down to the little bit badly proportioned building over here. And then the last thing to comment on are these three turrets right here that sit above the archway. And they look quite similar, in fact, to what you can see over here. So what that would mean is that, aesthetically speaking, is that I would definitely need to do a 2x2 column with a cone on top so that they're matching in some form. What this building doesn't have, that for some reason I did in mine, is that it doesn't have these sort of pilasters that run all the way up the side of the archway up to the top. I think I was doing this just to give a little bit more depth to an otherwise plain building, but I'm going to try be a little bit more honest to this source material and see how it turns out. So a little update right here. I'll get down a little bit, move the Durmstrang ship out of the way. You guys can see what it's looking like so far. Those are those indented archways, and I decided to end them roughly at the same level as the corridor so I could have a little bit of continuity. Those also line up somewhat with the same sort of height of these. They're not at the same plane, but you know, it's all about the idea that Hogwarts is built on the same scale. So that does look pretty cool. I decided to change up the arches to these that are a little bit more pointy, even though they don't really look it. And there is a gap in the middle, but I'm intending to do something a little bit similar to this building down here that you can see, with using one of those Nexonite shields as sort of a crowning piece right here in the middle. I'll figure out how that looks like in a bit, but I decided to go against just using the regular 1x8 just to see if I could do something a little bit different here. But so far so good. I dialed it down to it being 3 bricks on this side, and on this side, what is that? 3, 6, 8. So it's a little bit shorter than I initially said. I had said 4 and 10, so I brought it down to 3 and 8. And that's only because it was just getting a little bit too close for comfort. And this extends it by 3 bricks, so it's 3 bricks bigger than it was before, which is enough to get the idea across. We'll see if we can give a little bit more heft to the building. We're just going to take it a little bit slower as well, put a little bit more detail, especially once we start getting to the roof line, and we'll be able to put those little those things, little turret cones. And the good thing is this walkway does line up perfectly with the new entranceway, even though the old one was about over there. And then we are going to rip out all of this ground so that when we put the new tower and we do the landscaping around it, it will start looking a little bit more like this area over here. And what that will mean ultimately is, well, maybe not this area because I did put some effort into that, but generally speaking, I'm going to try to make the landscaping in Hogwarts all look quite similar. This area over here is quite bland. If I'm being honest, it's just quite plain. So I'm going to try to tie it all in, but we're going to slowly move our way this way. So we've reached a point where we're now working on the roof. I just spent a little bit of time building it up. And instead of going with the usual route of just your standard windows, as I kind of had before, I decided to use the small 1x2 panels, if you will, that have the window cut out. So it somewhat matches the grand staircase tower. In fact, it's the same ones that I've used over here on the side of the Great Hall. Reason being is just because I wanted to save the arches that I would typically use over a window for something else. And those are smaller and they fit kind of more with the scale of what we have going on over here. Like I said, we've just now started on the roof, and I've hit a little bit of a brain fart in that I'm trying to figure out how to put these, well, there's going to be a third one, but these 3 little spires, as you can see on the Great Hall. So similar idea, 3 spires, but then build the roof and keep going. But, well, the roof can't keep going because, well, that stud is exactly in line with that cone. So the next row would be half where that cone is. Now, obviously, you could say, oh, well, the solution to that is you just take these slopes and you start them 1 piece back, but then the roof would only be 1 row high. And I kind of wanted it to be 2. So I'm having a little bit of brain fart, and hopefully I will figure it out, because I don't want to do some sort of, inverted slope to have these stick out a little bit. So I might have to just play around a bit and see what we can come up with. But so far so good. It's a lot cleaner of a look, I think, than what we had before. It's ever so slightly wider, but I think it just has a little bit more depth in those indented sort of arches over there. A little bit of windows. We got something above the archway, And then hopefully once we go and put the tower right next to it, it will start looking a little bit more complete. And then we'll start working on a little bit of the tiling and such in between. So here's a good look at the now finished quad entrance building over here. I've just very temporarily placed that building over there on the side so that we can get an idea of how it fits within the larger scale of Hogwarts. I'll just take a step back as well. So I do think it fits in quite a lot better. I've had to steal quite a few of these sort of sand green slopes because I thought before, with it being almost entirely dark gray, that just wasn't fitting in. So I've now got to replace this hole that I've ripped in the Great Hull with some dark gray, but hopefully that won't be too big of a problem. This is probably a lot more accurate than the previous version. Well, in fact, it is. I've had to make a few sort of concessions in that right here. It's slightly different. I know I initially said that I was going to make them look like that, and that was my intention. It just kind of turned out that it wouldn't really work. And that one looks okay. It looks a bit odd. Just, yeah, it kind of looks like something that would be on the side of a visor, if I'm being honest, from Star Wars. But the building is looking pretty good, and I'm happy with how it turned out. It's about 1 brick shorter, actually, than it was before, for some strange reason. So here's just a quick back view of this quad entrance building, and I've actually intentionally decided to leave this all unfinished and the towers completely unsupported, and that's because next week's episode is going to be focusing on this bit over here, including getting that little bridge in and any other tweaks. But I thought it probably wasn't worthwhile building up some rock work to support the tower just to potentially tear it all down for what we're going to be working on next week. But I really hope you guys enjoyed watching this week's video. If you did, please think about giving it a sub and a like, and go down to the comments down below and let me know what you all think. In any case, I will see you in the next episode. Thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye.